Sorry. I gotta get the energy in there. We're going to be talking about drugs. This is part 2. It's going to be talking a lot about demonic possession. So this is kind of a topic. Some people will not believe anything I'm saying. I don't give a fuck. These are personal experiences that actually happened in my actual life that I'm going to be talking about. I do want to take a little break real quick and say, if you watched my last video, I talked about this Asian guy who I smacked in the face with a door. Anyway, I just took a walk. Ironically, I had a fiend energy of wanting to get high on something when I took a walk. Taking a walk's good for you, but I took a walk and then it kicked in. And I mean, my eyes were starting to look on the ground for joints and like cigarettes. Weird, like anything, everything. My thoughts were about getting a beer, get a cup of coffee. Like all this is because I just quit caffeine. So anyway, that did happen. And a good little tip, if you're, I'm not going to say every drug works this way, like heroin and certain drugs, but 15 minutes, 20 minutes is a magical number because it usually plays out to when you are fiending for something. Around that amount of time is all it takes for you to go back to normal. So you being able to just sit still and not make any decision or take a walk and just randomly walk, you understand. Trying to get 20 minutes to pass by because, you're trying to mask this pain. Sitting here, these are my thoughts. That's what was happening, And a good tip is to just wait 15 to 20 minutes. I will say that for cigarettes too. That really helped when I was with cigarettes. But I do want to talk about also. Sorry, that happened, and then I went into Walmart. And guess what happened? That Asian guy was in an aisle putting food away, and I walked up and I saw him. I said, "Hey, I'm sorry," and he looked me up and down, gave me the fuck you guys, fuck me guys, you know what I mean? And he reached his hand out and he's like, "Nice to meet you." Whatever it took to get another dose of that handshake. Addictive. Having this energy is addictive. That's so funny. It's funny because I went into a world of drugs and now I'm in a place where my energy's addictive. People get addicted to it. It's really cool. And you can have that too. Raise your vibe. But anyway, yeah, that guy, I didn't know he was gay. He was like, oh yeah. Like I smacked this, boom, right in the face. Like I remember when I opened the door to the bathroom, originally, I was in a state of, bam. His eyes were like, hit me again. I'm sorry. I had to mention it. I don't get a lot of action with ladies. I don't know. I think my twin flame has the same thing going on in her life where a lot of dykes and lesbians like her. And in my world, it's a lot of guys. Just is. I can get into it. I'm not getting into it. Anyway, and I'm not judging or anything. I'm just saying that's just how my life plays out. Like, usually when I walk down the street, women would be like, fuck you, bitch. And some guy would be like, ooh. It just happens. A lot. Anyway, but I did bring that up because we were going to get into demonic possession, and I did want to mention that I do have a story personally about my hands. I have a story about me on a mountainside in New Mexico with a narcissist and a heroin addict. And that was my first time ever seeing the enemy. The guy with the horns and the tail in the Bible. I don't want to say his name because algorithms, I already cuss a lot, but I think algorithms really hit hard when you say that name. So if you ever watch a spiritual video and they say the enemy, they're talking about the dude, you know what I mean? Anyway, that was my first time full force. It revealed itself. Didn't even try hiding anymore. And in that story, which I don't have time to tell fully, I had my hands in the air, in the winds and the snow, and they almost froze off. It's a big story. Something changed in my hands that day, which is interesting because I was always told, what are you willing to give up? And I was willing to give up my hands. And in a way, these aren't my hands. Like the ego that rules the body and such These aren't my hands. And I have stories about, like, that's why I make fun of that one where I touch that guy and he's like, oh. And I walk back in, he's like, another handshake? No. Yeah, I gave him another handshake because I didn't feel bad, but yeah, the touch. I get the magic touch. He's got the magic hands. He's a magic man. That's real. That's real. I got those powers. They kick in and out. I don't know. I'm not saying I'm a master at it. You know, but anyway, let's get into it. So, as I mentioned in the book, Mutual Suffering, in this book, I've already showed you in the last one, mutual suffering, and the list that goes down, it goes to fear, then drugs and alcohol. When you're in drugs and alcohol or at a low vibe, you don't even have to be on drugs and alcohol, but as long as you're easily subjected to fear. So on these entities that I'm talking about are at the level of fear. That's where they're at. That's where they're at. That's where they're at. And so that's really the goal for these entities, is to keep you at that level and below. So drugs and alcohol are great tools of influence to get you to do those things and stay on those things. Will keep the generational curse of you, because chances are, this is the truth, family bloodlines. Like anybody that's watching this video that knows me growing up, a lot of my friends that are drug addicts, guess what? There's actually entities that I know is a big topic that you don't see unless you got clairaudience or clairvoyance or some of these. I do have some of these abilities, so I've gotten to see them. But in general, they kind of are hovering in your family. They call them familiars. There's different names and different terms for them all. And a lot of families have generational curses of family members that do drugs, become narcissistic, easily manipulated by these forces, and then the next generation is born, and then those toxic traits are passed down. And when people try to break free, when you do break free is usually when you'll see them, or you'll go, whoa. Black sheep in general, or chosen ones, will experience this. Like I said, some of us have gifts. It's just the way it is. We came into this life with gifts. You know, me, I walked towards my death, so I went to the portal of source energy, and I risked my hands in the freezing snow. It's a long story. I did rituals that I didn't even know I was doing, which I'll get into in a minute. But anyway, I guess right now I'm just going to get into some examples of demonic possession that I've gotten into. I'm not going to say names, but these are influences in your life. You control your own reality, but they are around, and they are conscious beings that can hijack low vibrational people. So if you're on drugs and alcohol, you're more susceptible to these things taking over. It's a really deep topic. This one time I was in a meth house. There's this girl I knew. Again, I can't say names because I know these people. I was hanging out with her. It was on the last days before I finally left my family. This isn't my first demonic experience. Anyway, and I remember, you know, so I was used to it at this point, but I was riding with this girl, and I was sitting passenger. Me and her cleaned houses. That's what we did. We did some meth, and we would go and clean houses. And we were driving. I remember she's never snapped or got angry with me at all. And we were sitting there and we were talking, and I felt the energy change. And interestingly enough, because of who I am and my ability to stay in my energy, I don't even remember the words she said, as I say before in my anger videos, because aggression and stuff's really a vibe. So it's not really so much about what you say, but more about how you're feeling when you're doing whatever you're doing. And I remember she started saying something, and I said, well, then you can just let me the fuck out of the car. Like, it was so funny. Like, she got turned into this thing and was saying things, and I was all like, yeah, I don't give a fuck if we were being nice and peaceful every minute of every day for the months that we've hung out. That exact second I felt the energy shift, I was like, yeah, I don't give a fuck, bitch. Like, I didn't miss a beat. And I remember I was sitting passenger, and she was saying something, and I took my hand and I tapped her. I did that on her shoulder, and she went, don't fucking touch me. And then her face shifted back to normal. This is a real experience. I tapped her and she looked over and said, "Don't fucking touch me." And then her face shifted. I can't do it because no human being can shift their face from this other face back to them fast enough. What happened was I tapped and that demon literally couldn't handle it and fled. And so her face went back to the way it was. It didn't just rest, it shifted instantaneously. And then she literally was driving and looked forward and was like, "What just happened?" Because she couldn't remember anything. Real experience. I'm going to go through some more of them. I'm not going to tell, I don't know if I want to tell the one on the night. I guess I will. I'll tell it real quick. It's kind of a big one. The first time I ever experienced any of this was that day I walked towards my death in New Mexico anyway. Long story short, I'm in a car with a narcissist and a heroin addict. And what I found out was the narcissist next to me is a Muslim. Let me rephrase this. Me and this narcissist were in Missouri, and we went to a dope house, a trap house. And when we walked in, I'll never forget, out of all the rooms I've been in, it was the worst vibe imaginable. There's just people smoking meth, which isn't like a big deal when you're a meth head. But it was the worst vibe imaginable. And I remember walking in and like this one lady, like that's all she could do. These people were like not people. They were like, "Hit the pipe, stop. Hit the pipe, stop." They weren't talking. They weren't doing anything. They were getting high, but they were really just there. And there was a person in that room who I knew growing up, who I can't say the name of because people might know him. And this dude, when I used to know him, was like, very healthy. He's like a tall guy. He's like 6'4", 6'5" guy. He's a really tall guy. And he's like, he used to be like 280 pounds, and not fat. He's so tall that's probably, he might be like 260 or something, He's big guy, not fat. When I walked into this room, this is the only dude in the room with the soul, pretty much. And he weighed like 90 pounds. He looked like an Ethiopian kid. So I walk into this room, the vibe's horrible. And here's this one guy surrounded by Can you hear that beeping? Anyway, I don't know if you could hear that beeping. Anyway, but they're sitting there ritualistically. I didn't know any of this stuff. I didn't know spirituality, really. I didn't believe in any of this stuff. I had to experience rituals, demonic rituals firsthand. What was going on was this guy was being siphoned. And you could blame drugs and stuff. I got more stories, but you're just going to have to hear me out. So this dude was sitting here smoking, and he was a happy guy. He's the only one with any source energy hooked up to him. He weighed like 90 pounds. His arms were like that. And I walked in, I saw that, and everybody's surrounding this guy. And I went into the bathroom, and, lots of things happened. We met the heroin addict there that day, and I knew she needed to go with us on our journey. I have to skip all this because it's too much. Anyway, so we're driving into Mexico. Things are happening. I can't get into all of it. I'm not even gonna. I'm gonna scratch like 1%. I don't have enough time. And I remember there was a moment where we got high. It's so long of a story. I knew that drugs were going to manifest in our life, and a guy in the middle of a snowstorm, out of nowhere, manifested with some drugs, and we got high on some meth, and everybody in the car shifted, but me. I don't even care. The truth was, the person in the back seat was possessed by the enemy. This wasn't even just a demonic possession. I got to meet the enemy firsthand. full possession. You ever seen The Exorcist? Been there. Listen to me closely. I have seen The Exorcist in real life. It was kind of a bitch because after this experience happened, I had to walk around with everybody else at McDonald's and just like realizing that nobody's really gonna believe me. Whatever. But anyway, I got to witness full-fledged The Exorcist movie in the backseat of my car for days. It was a real experience. This is my Dark Night of the Soul experience. With a malignant, stab the fuck out of you narcissist on my right. Yeah. And I remember in the unfolding of it all, information was revealed that when we were in that house, the malignant narcissist, who happens to be a Muslim, did a ritual called Wadu, which is where they do water, and they do it in a certain way. You rub water off. You cleanse yourself with water. Water carries vibration, right? When we were in that dope house, apparently he did Wadu in the bathroom, but he forgot to clean up. You're supposed to clean up your own water. The heroin addict cleaned up the water. And so now I'm sitting here seeing what's going on with this, person in the back. At no point can you look at this female in the back and think a girl. Like, that's how dominating this force was. And it was a really dark experience. I can't get into all of it. It's just way too much, honestly. That's the problem about these topics. But drugs are a big part of it. And you can look into pop culture and movies and stuff. Drugs are always a big part of it. I was watching Evil Dead, the newer one, where the girl's a heroin addict, and then she's the one that gets possessed. And it's like, that makes sense. She's more suggestible, and, anyway. It pops up a lot. You'll see it in a lot of culture once you know this. But I'll never forget that experience. I remember driving, thinking I was thirsty. This is how I know they can read thoughts. I didn't know they could read thoughts. Some will tell you familiars can't read thoughts. I don't know. But I do remember I thought about drinking some water. I had a jug of water like this, and the car was the only water we had. And I had my rearview mirror here is my Toyota Camry. And I remember I thought I was thirsty, and I hear in the back seat, water. And I had this look in my rearview mirror of water. And I gave her my water, and she went. She did. I watched that happen. I drank water after that bitch. I hate that. Yeah, she drank some water, puked back into it and handed it to me. So yeah, that was fun. Anyway, she did all the puking. I can get into all that. I'm going to put that one to the side. That one's so big of a story, it's too much. I don't even know how to talk about that one. That one's too much. I could sit here and keep talking about that one for an hour or so. That happened to me. Ironically, I had one other story about a living animal or being siphoned. And it's funny because when I walked in that room that one day and saw that friend of mine growing up in school, whatever, skinny as bones, that vibe I remembered when I was in the meth house. I lived in a meth house that my narcissistical dad picked. That house was burnt down in the 18th century with kids. And I don't remember if the dad and mom got burnt. I don't know who all died. I think 4 or 5 people died. Three of them are, I think, are kids. Anyway, their graves are on the other property line. But they burnt alive in the house and they rebuilt it. So I was in a house where dark things happened. Sacrifices were made. That's the truth of things like that. Sacrifices were made. Nothing happens by accident. So when you understand that when people go through those experiences or die in those ways, they're really sacrificed. Anyway, I was in that house that my narcissistical dad chose to be in. And with the meth and all that stuff, I have a story about a dog that I was watching and I loved and I took care of. I don't have time to tell it all. And the owner eventually came back for it. It was a brindle pit. One day, I was driving in the backseat of a car because these 2 people that were driving this car were coming off of meth, and they almost wrecked and killed us like 5 different times into the oncoming traffic or into the wall. Anyway, so I just get done driving one of the scariest drives of my life. Later on, it would be that drive I just mentioned with the person, you know. That was the scariest drive of my life. But anyway, this is one of the scariest drives of my life. And I was a truck driver. Nothing came close. Anyway, and I get to this house, and there was this scrawny jackal skeleton dog with skin hanging on it that was jumping on me. And I was like, what is this dog on me? And when I looked down, I saw it was the dog I took care of. These entities that I'm mentioning siphoned the dog, knowing I cared about it. And I looked in its eyes, and it had hollowed out, glassy, frosted eyes. It was gone. The dog's soul was gone. I saw that. I cried. Nobody cared. Everybody made fun of me for crying. They're like, why is that pussy crying? And I remember that dog would scratch on the door because it wanted some meth, and they were smoking it. They blew meth in this dog's face every day till it became this scrawnied out thing. Anyway, so it's funny because that vibe, I felt that vibe. I remember that vibe. Years later, here I am walking into this house. First thing I felt was that vibe. It's the same vibe. And I got lots of these stories. You know, I could tell you the time I got sleep paralyzed by an entity that walked into my room at my mom's. Oh, again, living with a narcissist. These things are everywhere, especially around narcissists. And I'll never forget it. I could feel it. It walked into my room. I knew right where it was. Couldn't see a fucking thing. Doesn't matter. You could feel it. It's right there. And I got whatever, you know what I mean. Couldn't move. 3 different times that night. I keep going on. I got lots of these. I have a story about me at a construction site. This kind of goes into the whole topic of drugs and demonology. So I'll bring this one up. When I left my mom's, the whole tapped on that bitch's arm and she said, don't fucking touch me. And I got to watch as my narcissistical mom also was possessed. Truth. Don't really care. I was watching as the familiar spirits that have ruled over my bloodline, my family, and the generations that have been born, watched as I'm about to break free. I'm about to get out of this. I'm not going to do this no more. My kids aren't going to deal with this shit. That's what's really going on. These entities know that. They don't like knowing they're going to starve to death if you're not around. If people that are connected to source energy aren't around, they can't feed off anything. They'll starve. So it's their agenda to manipulate those that they can and influence them in ways that they do. You have total control of your life, so don't be all worried about it. It's not a thing to be worried about. I'm just saying that this is a truth. This is the truth. And when you break free from these bonds and these cycles, you will see that. Especially if you're a black sheep or a chosen one, then you already know. This was happening the whole time. Because when you're born, these things know who you are. They do. You have to understand there's a whole world of these things talking and communicating with each other. Big topic. Oh, which one was I just talking about? I was at a construction site, and these guys I was hanging out with wanted me to do some meth, and I remember I didn't do any. And the next day, they were doing things at the job site where it seemed like I was going to die. And everybody at the job site was doing this shit. Not meth, just they were moving like they weren't even real. Like I walk in the room and they're all like they're just doing that. And long story short, on the second day, I'm supposed to go to the job site again, but I decided that I saw way too much dark energy. I'm leaving. So this guy who originally was trying to do mess with me shifted. I remember I was in the car. I was with some other people, and he was outside the car, and I decided in my mind at that moment that we're going to leave. And I watched as this guy in front of my car ran and got a guy and got him in my vehicle. Like he somehow had a thought form. The entity that was controlling him knew that I was about to leave. And so this guy was like, ooh, trauma bond, let's go get one. And he brought a guy in my car. And it played out to where I'm at this dude's apartment, whatever, and he's talking to me. And my clear sentience or whatever kicked in. It was really trippy. It was really, I'm not saying this is going to happen for you necessarily, but it could. It kicked in hardcore. It was amazing. I was talking to this dude, and he was like, hey, listen, I know you're going to leave tomorrow, but you only got $100. And if you work tomorrow, you'll have another $100. That's $100 more than you have today. And I've been in your boat. You should listen to me. Who do you listen to? You should listen to me. All right? You don't have enough money. You're going to go out there driving in your car with no gas with your dog, and you only have $100. You're going to need another $100. So everything he said logically made sense. The vibe I felt was death. You will die if you go there tomorrow. No doubt. You're going to die painfully. Painfully. You're going to die painfully. You're going to be screaming in pain and agony and die painfully. You go here tomorrow. But what he was saying was, dude, you only have $100. You need another $100. I know. I've been in your shoes. It was really trippy because I'm sitting here talking to this guy, and when I was looking into his eyes are windows of the soul, I saw this thing sitting there. So there's his face and then this face, both lined up. When I looked into his eyes, I ain't gonna lie to you, it was very crippling. My heart was sunk looking at this thing, talking through this guy. But if anybody else who didn't have clear audience or clear sentience or whatever were to watch, they'd probably be like, makes sense. Like, it makes sense. And then that accident would happen and everyone would be like, how'd that happen? But here I am, turned in, tapped in, tuned on, whatever the fuck Abraham Hicks says. And anyway, so I didn't go. Whew, thank God. I would have died. They would have killed me at a job site. That's what would have happened. I've got a few minutes left. I know this is a weird video, and a lot of people will be like, oh, don't get all effed up about it. This has been going on the entire time of your life. And they don't really have influence over who do you listen to. Just don't fucking listen to them. It's really a secret. I got so many of these. You have no idea. Especially when I left my family unit, they kept following me. It didn't matter how far I drove. I drove all the way to Florida. They kept following me. I was in Florida Keys. I remember this guy tried to get me on crack. And I didn't want to do it. He got me hooked on cigarettes. He did get me with the cigarette. He loved bomb. He's a narcissist. He loved bomb. He got me with the cigarettes. And then I went, oh. And when I tried leaving away, I remember he was like, hope your dog can swim, buddy. Hope your dog can swim. And then I met a girl just a few miles down the road who's like, your dog's gonna burn. You ever seen the movie Legion where the grandma's like, your baby's gonna burn? I watched an old lady say that about my dog. She's like, your dog's gonna burn. They're trying to manifest into my life these things, but they don't have, dark forces don't have power at all. They got to use you to do the work. You can create anything you want, so don't worry about it. When somebody says your dog's gonna drown, I'm like, bitch, eat dick. Or dude, eat dick. When the bitch said, your dog's gonna burn, I'm like, bitch, eat dick. And nothing happened, and my dog made it. But a lot of people try to kill my dog. My mom even said, don't kill the dog, don't kill the dog. Then I went down, see what I'm saying? I left my mom, she was like, don't kill the dog, don't kill the dog. I'm all the way in Florida. Some guy's talking about drowning my dog. I go farther. Some bitch is like, your dog's going to burn. I already told you the story about me taking care of a dog and then them siphoning it. Trying to do these things to things I like. I have a story about me sitting next to this guy drinking beer. This is in New York. Again, I could keep making this video so long. I got so many of these experiences. He shifted. An entity took over him while we were drinking. It was me, him, and a couple of his friends. And he shifted. Other people might not be able to tell, but I could tell. They could tell he's being a douchebag, but they might not be able to tell that this guy isn't him. He shifted. He was sitting there petting this other dog, his dog, and he was like, yeah. He's sitting there fucking hitting this dog, and everybody's just sitting there drinking beer, acting like it's chill. And I was like, hey, bro, don't hit that dog in front of me. So I used my energy and said, I don't like this in my life. Stop doing that. And it stopped. And he got all upset and butthurt. The entity was like, because I told him not to. And he was like, Must obey. So you really have a lot of power. This video is going to cut out any time. I know it's kind of a deep topic. I apologize. But I just don't feel like hiding back any of this information. This is real experiences. I could keep going. You have no idea. At this point, my vibe's so high, they can't touch me. That's why when I did drugs recently, ironically, I almost got in a fight with a narcissist 2 days ago. And I know it's because I was doing drugs. And I kind of got out of it. It doesn't matter. No matter what path you take, you're always fine. Just know that. But, follow your feelings. That one day, if I went to the job site, painful death. No doubt. There's not been a lot of moments in my life where I could feel painful, torturous, bleeding out and screaming death in a direction. And it's ironic because there's just nothing that could make me go, so it wouldn't even matter. Isn't that interesting? Because when you follow your feelings, you're so in tuned, you couldn't even go if you forced yourself. But I will admit, when he was talking, the guy, the narcissist, the puppet, whatever, when he was talking, smooth talk, very charming. You need to, make sense, don't it? I've been where you are. You only have $100. Like, the logic. Whoa. The logic. Whoa. But your feelings know things your mind don't. So always follow your feelings. You'll be fine. I don't make this video to scare you. Comment below if you want. This is going to end any second. I got so many more, I got more. I got more of these. You have no idea. You have no idea the shit I've gone through. I watch horror movies. Been there. I watch horror movies. Like when I watch The Exorcist, been there. I've seen that. The whole the backseat of my car for days. Yeah, been there. Full force. No idea. If I have enough time, I'll tell you one more. If it cuts out, oh well. I was in Florida, and I remember I smoked some weed, and I was at a McDonald's, and I parked, and I got stoned, and like I said, these things were following me. So it doesn't matter how far I drive and what people I see, they're gang stalking me. I'd walk around. When I met Kevin Taylor Jones in Florida, he even said, whoa, look at all these familiars and demons and entities following us. Because he knows about it too. A famous writer. Me and him are sitting there watching as 10 people are staring at us. From across the street, there's like 10 of them. They don't even know they're doing it. They don't know why they have a feeling to stare at us. Called evil eye. Anyway, so I left, and I remember I was at McDonald's, and I found a joint. I smoked this joint, and I remember there was a bush or whatever, and there was this old lady walking her dog,